All right, what's up, YouTube? 𝗙𝗲𝗲 here, and I'm joined today by one of our amazing tutors on our team, 𝗙𝗲𝗲𝗲. Joe just
Hey,
took the
everybody.
October test today with you guys, and I can't wait to interview him and find out what he thought. We're also on TikTok. Hey, TikTok, what's up? Real quick, guys, if you struggled today on this test, I'm running an SAT class. It starts at the beginning of November. I put the link in the description below. So sign up for that and don't give up. You know, if this was a bad round for you, that's okay. Just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just keep going. Okay. Joe, so happy to have you. Thanks for coming.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to
Excited to chat.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Do you want to tell everybody out there a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, hey, everybody. 𝗙𝗲𝗲𝗲. I graduated from Boston College about 2 years ago, where I was an economics major. I'm now in consulting, and I help Laura out on the tutoring team. And I've been doing that now for about, let's see, how long has it been now? Like 6 to 8 months, maybe?
Yeah.
So been learning a lot with her also and helping a lot of students out, I think. So it's been
good. And Joe is amazing, guys. Fun fact for you, I tutored his brother and his sister, but he
not
was
me.
he was too cool for me. So, but now we work together, which is even better. And he's awesome. So, you know, if you like what Joe has to say today, you can also work with him one-on-one. So that's just something else to keep in mind. Let's get into the questions. Does that sound
Sure
good?
thing. Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. So, you know, like people have been saying, Joe, all year since the rollout of this new test, that the real tests when they get in there are harder than the Blue Book practice tests.
Yeah.
In your opinion today, did you feel like that was the case?
I did feel like that was the case. I definitely think the actual exams are harder than the Blue Book practice exams. Probably fairly in line with like past SAT exams, but they're definitely harder than Blue Book.
Interesting. So let's get into a little bit more specifics there. Did you feel like the math was harder or the English was harder or both?
I actually felt like both were harder. I think it was module 1 was like very easy. I felt like very straightforward. Had about 5-10 minutes left on both sections where I was just kind of like reviewing answers and chilling. But that lulled me into a false sense of security for module 2, which I felt like was much harder and didn't get the pacing quite right on.
Yeah, I know. And I've also had issues myself with that. And I think it's like such an important thing for students to understand. And that's why I love having you guys go in and actually take the digital SAT, because you took a paper test. I mean, you're a dinosaur now. You know what I mean?
I am a dinosaur. It was a completely different exam back in the day. Had those long English passages. You had to take notes on the whole way. It was on paper. Yeah,
those were the days.
Like a lot longer.
Yep.
But yeah, so I feel like it's a less grueling experience now, although it did still take like, I don't know, 4 hours from end to end. I had to be there at 8, and then there was a long line, and then like by the time you actually get out, it was like 11:30. So
yeah,
it was a pretty long process, but the actual exam was fairly short.
Yeah. And it's valuable that you actually sat in on a real one, because we can do practice tests till the cows come home. But when we actually go in as tutors and take the real thing, it's just, I think it really solidifies like how good we can deliver our tutoring to our students.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like now you can really emphasize and reiterate, hey, you got to pick up the pace on module 2.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's going to be, you're not going to be happy at the end of this. So that was awesome that you did that. So that being said, okay, so you got like a 1500 on your paper test before you went to Boston College. What do you think you scored on this, if you had to guess?
I mean, that's the big question at the end of the day. Honestly, I don't feel like I did much better, which is interesting. I felt like I was going to knock it out of the park going into this one, and it was definitely harder than I anticipated. I think the speed of it was really what got me. I think with a lot of the tutoring, we're usually walking students through questions, so you're not like doing it at like a very fast pace yourself. And so I think I was a little caught off guard by how quick I actually had to move.
Well, I think one of the things too that makes it really challenging, it's the reading passages and how closely and carefully you have to read on some of them, you know, because like if you read it on a superficial level, or if you try to like speed read and zoom through it, I feel like every single answer choice starts to sound good.
They were. And I was surprised by how good the options actually all were. It was never like one. There was like maybe one where it was like on first read you were like, all right, that one's not it.
That's
irrelevant. We're still left with 3 questions or 3 answers that you could have chosen between.
Right. So I think, I don't know, I feel like the key, and tell me if you agree with this or not, is to get really quick and efficient at like the grammar questions, the transition questions, the note-taking questions, because you need all the time you can get.
Yeah, those were, being fast on those was definitely really helpful. The note-taking ones especially, I actually, on module 2 of the English, because some of the upfront questions were so hard, and we can talk more about like specific question types, I think it was really data questions that were really difficult. And I'm an economist. Well, I'm not an economist, but I was an econ major. So those are like right up my alley, and I found those difficult still. But then like the note-taking questions, I felt like were really easy on all of them. We'll see what the score comes back on with those. But at the end, I was so out of time. It was like 3 of them in a row. It was interesting. I didn't realize it was all broken up by like question type almost. Like all the note-taking were at the end,
right?
Which makes sense. I know we've discussed like standard English conventions being at the end and whatnot, but
well, here's the thing that's
those note-taking ones, you almost didn't even have to read the notes. It would say like the student wants to convey this, and then you just look for the one that conveyed that, and like that saved me a good like couple minutes at the end.
Right, and that's what I was going to ask you about actually, because that was something that I was predicting and may possibly be on this test. They changed Bluebook test 2, which we talked about in a recent team meeting we had. And they put a note-taking question on there where you had to actually read the notes to answer it. So I'm thinking, is it trending this year for the 2024-2025 school year where you actually have to read the bullet points? In your experience today, you didn't need to read the bullet points on any of them?
I didn't think so, but I could have been moving so fast. I just got it wrong.
Well, so now here's another thing. So it's so interesting. You'd mentioned something earlier. Oh my gosh, I hope I don't forget what it was, because I swear Anesh, who took the August test, said the same thing. I remember what you said now. Anesh also said, Joe, that the statistics, the probability, that realm, the problem solving and data analysis questions were hard on the August test.
They were definitely hard. And those are the ones that I would have considered most in my wheelhouse of answering going in. And I found them really tricky, There was some different like percentage maths you had to do. I see some people mentioning related questions in the chat where you had to like back out from like a smaller number to like the overall number, and then go from the overall number of the percentage that wasn't the smaller number, like how it worked. It was pretty crazy. And then just the data questions were also like very in the weeds of figuring out how pieces went together on the English section also.
Yeah, I actually, speaking of the comments, Warrior commented, he said, guys, don't forget there are 2 experimental questions. Warrior, that is very positive of you to think that way. Let's hope.
I hope I didn't waste all my time on one of the experimental ones.
But if you got it wrong, it's okay, Joe, right?
Yeah.
Like, who knows? Maybe you did better than you thought.
Exactly.
So is it safe to say that those problem solving and data analysis questions are different than anything we've seen? Like, are they different? Is that what makes them hard, or are they just evolved?
Yeah, they're just kind of like next level, I feel like. They even got into asking like specifically, was it like a positive correlation, like one of the questions, which I thought was like, I don't know, I feel like you don't talk about correlation that much in high school.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I've noticed a trend with the reading passages when they're science ones, they do talk about correlation now.
Yeah, and that's where it was. Yeah, it was in the
okay.
Yep.
So I've been going over that with my students. We should talk about that in our next team meeting, because
for sure.
Like, some of my students, like I had a student the other day who it was the wording was direct correlation, right? So I asked my student, I said, do you know what a direct correlation is? And they misinterpreted it. It's basically the same as a positive correlation. If one goes up, the other one goes up. And
versus
if they
like
don't know,
inverse correlation. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Or a negative correlation. So an inverse correlation, negative is the same. But if they don't have this foundation in like the science speak, it's really hard to answer or interpret a science passage. You know?
I felt like a lot of them were very sciencey in nature, like asking about different species and like climate change and things like that, which honestly, like, I feel like having some understanding of that, I don't know if that made it helpful or worse, because I was like, oh, that's a really interesting like passage. That's an interesting fact. I started like thinking about it too much instead of just answering the question.
I feel like it could
understanding, I think.
Yeah, sorry to interject. I feel like it could make it worse sometimes when a student pulls in too much prior knowledge and then they end up picking an answer choice that could be true, but there's not enough information in the text because they know it themselves to be true. So they're like, oh yeah, that's right. But it's like, okay, but it wasn't mentioned in the passage.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. That's crazy. So, okay. So here's my next question then. I mean, just to drill down, if you had to pick one aspect of this test that you thought was the hardest part, what would you say it was?
I mean, outside of just like getting your timing down on module 2, I feel like it was those data analysis questions.
Okay, good to know. Yep. It sounds like we're doing some statistics with our students.
Yeah, I think so. It was more like the English section though. That was the hard part. Not like doing calculations or statistics. It was like interpreting data questions. I just felt like they were very, very tricky questions. There was even one about like mediating variables, and I was like, that's like advanced like economic stuff where you have like a 3 variable thing basically with one in between. And I was like, wow, that's like not something I would have expected. So it was more the English data questions, I think, that were unique.
And, it's funny that you say that too, because you have a degree in economics. I have a degree in math. Yeah. And sometimes when I look at some of the math problems on module 2, they're so abstract. They literally remind me of things I did in my college level math course. So I was on the phone with a parent the other day and she was like, Laura, honestly, she's like, do you think that the digital SAT is harder than the paper SAT? And I have to be honest with all you guys out there. I do think it's harder than the paper SAT, but I think that there are things that you can do to make it easier. For example, if it is an abstract question that's hard to understand, you can use nice numbers. You can use Desmos. I mean, there are workarounds. But I really, I almost feel like test prep is more important than ever. Like I couldn't imagine being a student going into the test cold.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree that like the strategies are more important than ever because using those was how like Desmos, for instance, super helpful in the math. I feel like 80 to 90% of the questions I turned to Desmos. And using like the regression functionality was super helpful at points. And just like having it solve complicated formulas for you basically for variables, like that's such an advantageous.
So wait, am I hearing you say you did a regression on this test?
Oh, I used it like 2 or 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I thought that was helpful. And then there was a lot of like, there was some I had to even work backwards on myself because I was just like, I have no idea how you'd solve that without just plugging in these answers right now. There's lots of like complicated, like they'd give you like a quadratic or something and then like a complicated like point it goes through where it's got like a number plus a square root over something else and like you just can't really solve it by hand and you got to like plug it in. And something I was caught off guard by kind of was that you can't copy and paste in Desmos in the actual exam versus when you're using Desmos like just online you can copy and paste. And I kind of got used to using that functionality a good bit for when you type something complicated in like that, you just copy and paste it again for like the next X that you have to plug it in for or whatever. Then you had to retype it out again, and that took like some extra time.
I know, that's too bad. That would be such a nice feature if you could copy and paste.
So that's good. Good for me to know because I wasn't aware of that.
You know what? I'm almost wondering if there is a way to do it by hand that's a shortcut but maybe it's like a new thing where we're not aware of it or you didn't think of it in the moment. Let me give you an example why I'm thinking that. I was working with a student the other day and it was a very abstract, complicated algebra problem. And so we were like, okay, let's put this in Desmos. We'll set sliders for it, whatever. And then all of a sudden, Joe, like 20, 30 seconds later, it dawned on me that we could use the product of the solutions, which is C over A. And we just took like the last term was JK, and then we took it over something else. I can't remember. But anyways, there was a by hand shortcut. But sometimes in the moment, you just don't think of it.
No, I bet there was. And I was like, I feel like you need like quadratic formula or something like that to be able to figure out using this. And I was just like, I don't want to deal with that.
Well, you know, the reason why I was just thinking that too is because there was someone in the comments, I missed it now, I don't know, it was up a little bit, and they said that they only used Desmos twice today. They did most of it by hand, which is kind of interesting, right? But I think that it's been trending that way a little bit too. I think College Board almost is catching on to like, oh, like, you know, this gets really easy with Desmos. Let's try to design questions where like they can't use Desmos.
Yeah, I think they are.
Yeah. But okay. So if you could rewind, well, I think I already know the answer to this. I feel like we should skip it. If you could rewind time and go back and study one thing, would it be statistics stuff or like problem solving?
No, it wouldn't be statistics stuff. Because I don't know how I already have background in that. Like I know what I'm doing in that, and it was still just hard. It's just time consuming. Like you have to be very careful in what you're reading and answering, because like a slight difference in the wording of those answers is challenging. So it's just like a time thing, I guess, and buying yourself time with the other parts of the exam. There's nothing like in particular I'd say like you need to like go back and study. It's kind of all the same topics we've known they test on, and just kind of spread out across like they hit anything like particularly hard. Okay.
How do you think students should be studying if they want to be successful on this test?
It's like that. I mean, targeting your weaknesses first is always like the best thing. Once you've got all of your areas covered and you like know the content, then I think it becomes a question of getting used to the types of SAT questions they ask and the timing, which I think are best done through just taking a lot of practice exams.
Yeah.
And actually timing yourself and going through it at the actual pace you're going to have to.
Right. And I'm going to piggyback off that because there have been studies that have done like empirical studies that have shown there is a positive correlation between, right? Like how I put that in there? Between taking lots of questions. The more questions you practice, the higher your score is going to be. Like it literally does come down to seeing as many questions as possible. But I feel like there's an added layer to that that's important too. You can't just practice questions and then just move on. If you get something wrong, you need to find out why.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Right? And if you're
I included that as self-explanatory.
Yes, right. But no, you know, it's funny, Joe. Like to us, it feels self-explanatory. But I've worked with kids before who have taken a test and never looked at it again. And I'm like, did you go through your misses yet? They're like, no. And they took it like months ago. So like you never know, but I just have to say it, I guess, you know, is you guys got to make sure you go back and find out why you're getting these wrong. Otherwise, history is going to repeat itself and then you'll get the same score. So you're doing all that work, all that blood, sweat, and tears, and then there's no payoff because you're not going back and reflecting on your mistakes. You know what I mean? So that's
definitely important.
Super important for everybody. Okay. I guess
trying to skim through the chat and see if there's anything interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the next question because we covered a lot of ground. So
it was interesting on the point about like practicing a lot of questions too. I actually think I saw like 2 or 3 questions that were like direct repeats of past exams. So the more practice you do, the more you can see those pop up.
Right. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I feel like that I've heard of, you know, question bank questions that are similar being on there and blue book questions that are similar being on there. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So if you were going to do things differently with time management, let's talk about that for next time because you weren't happy about your pacing for module 2.
Yeah.
What would you do differently?
It's a good question. I was thinking about that when I was leaving the exam, or like, honestly, I was thinking about it midway through the exam. I'm like, oh God, like, well, how should I have done this differently last? If I could do it over. But I know we've talked about like the strategy of like for English, for instance, like skipping at question 15 and getting done with your standard English conventions and like those types of questions first. I don't know. I guess I'm OCD. I don't like skipping. So I started at the beginning and then just like went as fast as I could through the standard English conventions at the end, I guess. because I felt like for my brain, it was a little easier. So like start with the hard ones, get those out of the way, and then move to standard English conventions. But I could also see the reverse argument of like, get those ones out of the way, and then you know exactly how much time you have left for those like harder questions.
Yeah.
But I kind of liked being rushed on the standard English conventions versus the ones where it's so tedious and you really have to read it in depth. So
right.
I like the order I did that in. It was just, I should have probably been marking some more questions and coming back. But I also feel like then you lose time because you got to like double read the question at that point. If you don't figure it out in the first way through, then you got to do it all over again, kind of. So like, I feel like I just had to move faster, basically. Just like kick into gear a little bit more instead of just kind of like la-di-daing through the test.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Like I kind of was just like, oh, solve this one, solve that one. And then like I kept a general eye on the clock. Like I kept it open the whole time, and it was like, knew I generally had like 1:30 for each math question, and was trying to stick around there and like having it as it counts down. But at a certain point, it was just kind of getting off pace, and questions always get harder at the end. So you got to just like take advantage of all the easier questions and not like, I feel like I was kind of checking answers as I went, and like I'd find the right answer and then I would check to make sure all the other ones were wrong answers. And I feel like you just don't really have time to like be that cautious, or at least like save it for the end.
Right. Yeah. And listen, I can relate to you, and it makes complete sense. I've had the same experience in the past with like not having enough time for module 2. So I don't know, like, I feel like, so when I'm working with my students, and I'm sure you do this too, like I'm basically having them run a whole bunch of trials. Like, okay, try this test starting at number 1. Okay, now try this test starting at number 15. Let's compare and let's talk about it, because every person is different, and I can get your take on wanting to go in a linear fashion and being OCD about it. And I think like 25% of the students I work with like doing it that way too. So I think the most important thing for us as tutors is to not shove an approach down someone's throat and say, you know, you have to do it this way. Like, this is the only way. Like, and that's why I love when we do one-on-one, because we always are customizing, you know, like, oh, like,
exactly.
For you, okay, great. But here's one thing, and I don't know if this is your experience today. This is another thing that has also bit me before taking a test. Sometimes when I get into the real test environment, I am so nervous and worried about being perfect that I try too hard to get each question right. Do you know what I mean? Like double checking, triple checking, like making sure, second guessing. And like, I really, really feel like the sweet spot taking this test is when you can go in there and be like nonchalant a little bit and casual, like you're taking a practice.
Yeah, totally agree. I felt like that's how I walked into it, was that I was like very laid back, and then and like not being too cautious, and like I was like, I want a perfect score on this thing. Like, so I was just like being careful and making sure I got each one right, and then that didn't balance out well with the time piece. So you definitely still balance.
Well, it sounds like we should go in and take another test soon. Wouldn't that be fun?
Maybe.
You know, like why not? Like we'll have a round 2.
Yep. Run it back.
Yeah.
We'll see how it comes out. I'll be curious.
Right. Well, but, so what if people out there ask for your score, like, should we post it? What do you think?
I don't know. It's a lot of pressure. It might not be good. It might be embarrassing.
Well, listen, you know what? Honestly, like, I think there's a difference when you're tutoring it versus taking it time too. Like,
oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? I know you articulate
Coaches don't play.
your students always want to work with you again. Like they always ask for you, like, you know what I mean? Like, so like you're a phenomenal teacher. So if this is your first time taking the digital in person and you don't do that well, I don't think that it reflects on your tutoring abilities.
No, the coaches don't always have to play, but yeah, it was definitely interesting to take it again after like, when was the last time? Like 7-8 years ago or something that I like, took an official one. So
were people staring at you? Like, were people?
No, I was going to say, speaking of testing experience, the testing experience, I feel like that's a fun topic. But no, I was blending right in. I feel like I don't look that old. There were guys there with like full beards. I was like, these high schoolers look way older than me.
Oh my gosh, that's
I was
so
chatting
funny.
with students in the line and just kind of hanging out, and it was always kind of funny. I was like, no, I graduated like years ago.
Yeah.
Like, why are you here? I'm like, oh, I do some SAT tutoring, getting the scoop, seeing what things are like.
I know it is fun to talk to the students. I had a girl who was in 7th grade sitting in front of me, like one of the last tests I went in.
Crazy.
That was crazy.
It was funny to hear the students' comments on it too as we were leaving. Like, my favorite quote was like, "That was absolutely diabolical." That's just a funny description, but that's just one person. Testing environment though, like, kind of threw me off. Also, that definitely did not help. It was like, I feel like if you can get a smaller room, that's much better. I took it at like a hotel in Boston, and it was like a room of 400 people. It was huge, and then they like started everyone in waves. So then like people were starting and ending at different times, like moving around. Like the proctors were like making announcements while I was testing. It was like not a good environment. I definitely lost like 2 minutes on each end of like a lot of distractions.
Wow, that is
really interesting. So
I
would like choose your environment wisely, because those 5 minutes make a difference.
That's so interesting. It was in a hotel too, because I know like California is getting creative, trying to figure out like new testing sites because they haven't had enough. Like I had a friend also take it today. He's actually taking it right now because he's West Coast. He had to fly to Sacramento from LA to go take the test.
I heard one of the students was telling me their friend had to go to like DC to take it or something. I was like, that's crazy. So,
but yeah, it's just
register early if you're planning to take it in a big city.
Yeah, seriously, register early, you guys. Like, do not wait, please. It will be really tough to get in, So, okay, let's do a lightning round. So I'm gonna just quick fire some questions at you. All right. Did you hide the clock or show the clock?
No, definitely show it. That's like your only time valve.
Okay.
Or like time tracker.
I like it. How much scrap paper did you use?
Only the one sheet. I asked for actually another one at the beginning, but they wouldn't give me one. They said you had to wait until you finished the other one, and then they could come and bring you another one.
Do you know why that is?
No.
I'm speculating.
They were losing track of people with scrap paper and leaving the exam or something.
I think that's what it is. I don't think they want anyone bringing anything about the questions outside with them. Mm-hmm.
That's probably it. But I just like folded it up into like a little 4-section fold. It was also like tablecloths on the table, which kind of made it hard to write. So like I needed the folded paper to like my pencil to work.
Man, your testing conditions, that was something else.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful room.
I'm sure.
There was like crystal chandeliers and like it was a giant conference room type of thing. But,
did you use a pen or a pencil?
Pencil. Yeah.
Okay.
Which, I don't know if it matters, but you probably don't have a lot of time to be erasing things. But I did redraw a triangle at one point to like make it a little more proportional for my brain.
Cool. Yeah. Did you use an iPad, laptop, or Chromebook?
Laptop.
Okay. What was the percent of math questions you used Desmos on?
I used it for like 80%, but that also is because I didn't have a separate calculator. So if you just consider it a calculator, like I used it on most questions.
Awesome. All right. That's it. That's it for me, Joe. Great job today. Right. Thanks for going in there. So I guess we'll hang tight for a couple weeks and, see how you did and maybe do it again sometime. I hope you had fun today, though. Was it fun?
It was fun until I was not doing so well, and then it was less fun. But I got it's a beautiful day here. I got a nice bike ride in on the way there and the way back, and so that was a pleasant part of the experience. For sure.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, and I think your students are really going to appreciate it now when you have this experience to share with them.
For sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
I've told too many people about taking the SAT this weekend because they all thought it was funny. But now I'm going to be embarrassed when this score comes back and I do worse than I did in high school.
Listen, if you do bad, right, which I'm sure bad to you is still amazing to most people.
I don't think I did bad, but I was hoping for bad. So
and you can even share that with your students, because the thing is, like, we're not always going to be perfect. We're not always going to be on all the time, but I think it's just what we do with the adversity and what we do with those challenges. You know what I mean? And like, Yeah, so I think that it makes you more relatable, if anything. You know what I mean?
No,
So,
it was definitely a valuable experience. So.
Yeah. Well, awesome.
Excited
Thank
to
you
talk
so
about
much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of
course.
fun. Thanks to
Hope
you
this
guys out
was
there.
insightful, everyone.
Yeah. Hey, make sure you guys sign up for my class. So November 3rd, it starts. It's an SAT strategy class. The link is in the description. I have a limited number of spots, so don't wait too long, okay? All right. Bye, Joe. Good seeing you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.